Welcome to Know Europe. Today we are covering one of the most powerful movements unfolding across the continent, the protests for Gaza. From the very first demonstrations in 2023, to the humanitarian crisis of 2024, to the Flotilla incident of 2025, and finally to the massive strikes and marches happening right now in October 2025. This is the complete story. By the end of this video, you will understand why millions of people across Europe are raising their voices, and what this means for the future. The beginning, October 2023. It all began in October 2023, when Hamas launched a major attack on Israel. Israel responded with heavy military operations in Gaza. Very quickly, the humanitarian situation deteriorated. Reports of civilian deaths, destroyed homes, and shortages of food and electricity shocked the world. In Europe, people reacted almost instantly. In London, Paris, Berlin, and Madrid, the first solidarity marches took place. The slogans were simple but powerful: "Ceasefire now" and "Free Palestine." These early demonstrations were not yet massive, but they planted the seeds of a movement that would only grow stronger. The first wave of protests, as the conflict dragged on into late 2023 and early 2024, the protests became more organized. University students, trade unions, and human rights groups joined in. Every weekend, marches filled the streets of European capitals. The message was clear: people wanted their governments to push harder for a ceasefire and for humanitarian aid to reach Gaza. At this stage, the protests were still largely peaceful, but the numbers were growing. Tens of thousands of people were now marching, and the issue was becoming impossible to ignore. Escalation in 2024. By mid-2024, the situation in Gaza had worsened dramatically. Civilian casualties were rising, and international aid organizations were warning of famine. In Europe, this translated into even larger demonstrations. Spain and Ireland openly criticized Israel's policies, while in Germany and France the protests sparked heated debates about free speech, anti-Semitism, and public order. What had started as solidarity marches was now a political force. Protesters were not only calling for a ceasefire, they were demanding that their governments take a moral stand. The humanitarian crisis of 2025. By 2025, the crisis in Gaza had reached its peak. Food shortages, lack of medical supplies, and destroyed infrastructure created unbearable conditions. The United Nations called for urgent action. In Europe, the protests became impossible to ignore. Trade unions began to organize strikes. Cultural figures, academics, and even some politicians joined the demonstrations. The movement was no longer just about Gaza. It had become a symbol of people demanding that their governments listen to public opinion and act with humanity. The Flotilla incident. In early October 2025, a humanitarian flotilla left Barcelona, carrying supplies for Gaza. For many, this flotilla represented hope. But before it could reach its destination, it was intercepted by Israel. Activists on board were detained. This single event reignited anger across Europe. People saw it as proof that humanitarian aid was being blocked. Within days, protests erupted in Spain, Italy, the United Kingdom, Ireland, and Portugal. The flotilla became a symbol, not just of aid, but of resistance and solidarity. The massive protests of October 2025. Between October 4th and 7th, Europe witnessed some of the largest protests in recent history. In Spain, more than 70,000 people marched in Madrid and Barcelona. In Italy, a general strike brought the country to a standstill. Schools, transport, and even parts of the healthcare system shut down, as millions joined the demonstrations. In London, the protests were huge, with more than 400 arrests, as police clashed with demonstrators. In Ireland and Portugal, thousands filled the streets, chanting against what they called genocide in Gaza. These were not isolated events. They were coordinated, massive, and impossible for governments to ignore. Today's situation, October 2025, and that brings us to today, As of today, October 2025, protests are still ongoing in southern Europe, especially Spain, Italy, and Portugal. Demonstrations continue daily. Governments are under pressure to reconsider their diplomatic stance toward Israel. The demands from the streets are clear: an immediate ceasefire, unrestricted humanitarian aid access to Gaza, and the release of Flotilla activists. Whether European governments will act on these demands remains uncertain. But one thing is clear: the voice of the people louder than ever. This has been the complete timeline of Europe's protests for Gaza, from October 2023 to October 2025. If you found this video informative, please like, share, and subscribe to Know Europe YouTube channel. And most importantly, let us know in the comments, do you think these protests will change European policy? Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.